In this video, we will review each trap, highlight its mechanism, and figure out how to survive and ultimately beat all the traps in Saw 6. The movie doesn't play around much and starts right with the first trap. Two victims, Eddie and Simone, are about to get their skulls pierced with large machine screws. Now for your information, machine screws are particularly wide in diameter and therefore much more painful when piercing through a skull. In fact, they would not simply just pierce a skull, but much more violently break through it. In order to survive, our two characters have to slice off body parts and put them on a wedge. They have 1 minute time. After the minute runs out, the character with the least weight on the wedge will get a migraine. Now the first important note here is the timer starts only when both victims pull the trigger by standing up or bowing forward too much. Simone is the first character to wake up and releases the machine. However, both need to release the mechanism in order to start the game. She tries to convince her counterpart not to move.
Don't lean forward!
Next time, try screaming louder. Perhaps tell him right off the bat that if he moves, he will die. I promise you this will probably do it. The best chance here for survival is clearly not to start the game by too much movement. If you delay the activation of the trap, you technically have infinite time available to fiddle around with the headgear and find a way out of it. The knives could be used as tools to release components and loosen the trap up a bit. In any way, having time here is of importance. 60 seconds is just not enough time to come up with rational ideas. Now at first I was a little confused as to why none of the characters would place other objects onto the wedge other than sliced off belly fat and arms, but after looking at it a little closer, it wouldn't make a big difference. Perhaps it would even cause you a potential disadvantage. Basically, there is no filter that prevents you from putting anything you want onto the wedge. That is true. However, by observing the room, we realize that there is pretty much nothing available to shove down the tube. Everything seems to be fixed. The knives, for instance, are chained quite securely onto the table. So the only objects possible to put through the tube would be your clothes, of which your shoes are probably the most valuable item because of the related weight. If you choose to go this way, however, you must consider that your opponent has the exact same option. And if his clothes are heavier than yours, you're automatically pressured into cutting off precious body parts. Therefore, it is a risky solution. If you really want to take the risk though, you would do well to shove down those things only in the last few seconds and pray that your opponent has less weight on the wedge than you. In any way, it is obvious that the best way to beat this trap is definitely not to start the game in the first place. We can do this, like mentioned before, by avoiding too much movement and appropriate communication. Now the second trap tries to screw over Mr. William Easton, who was placed there because, well, like everyone else targeted by Jigsaw, he's an asshole. The trap this time consists of 4 tests he has to overcome. Now oddly enough, the first test also involves his office janitor. Now don't ask me why this poor man is involved, as if being a janitor isn't enough hardship already. Anyway, they both are attached to a machine that crushes their torsos every time they take a breath. We can see that here. Now this test is quite challenging to get out of because being strapped on hands and feet is a nasty way to immobilize someone. Unless this person has asked you to, then I guess it can be sexy, you kinky bastards. Well anyways, unfortunately none of our characters asked for a sexy time and there is no other way to beat this trap than beating your opponent, meaning someone must and will die. However, there are several things you can do to stretch out your given time and thus gain an advantage over your opponent. The simplest way to do that is twist your torso. At the end, just before Mr. Easton gets released, we can see that the strap is loose enough for some range of motion. I assure you, even just a small twist will give you a significant advantage and time bonus, because you minimize the pressure on both sides in shifting the angle from where the machine is closing in. While this strategy can make a big difference, it won't instantaneously save your life. For a sure victory, you must control your breath. What I mean is, the more and deeper you breathe, the faster you will get crushed. So naturally, you want to avoid breathing as much as you can. And so, the single most important thing here is stay calm. Because the higher your heart rate, the more oxygen your body requires, and the more you end up breathing. There are 2 techniques I would recommend. Either you take the deepest breath possible before crushing your body and hold it. Most people are able to hold their breath between 30 and 120 seconds. If you don't smoke, which William doesn't, you have a great chance of winning against someone like the janitor who does. However, that still seems to be a little risky. The other way, and my personal favorite, would be controlled hyperventilation. It might appear counterintuitive since that also increases your heart rate, but you see, controlled hyperventilation is a tactic literally used by free divers to diffuse their system of carbon dioxide. If applied correctly, one can increase the time of holding one's breath immensely, which would be very beneficial in our situation here. The average adult takes 8 to 16 breaths per minute. To hyperventilate, you may double these numbers. Professor McGivern from the Neumann University has found out after having done a classroom experiment that after 30 seconds of hyperventilation, the average breath holding duration increased by 24 seconds, which goes without saying is an incredible improvement. However, I must add here that hyperventilation to hold one's breath can be very dangerous and should not be performed when not being supervised, especially underwater. In the case of Mr. Easton, however, we can assume that this technique is less risky in comparison to the trap and therefore could be very helpful indeed. After surviving the first test, Mr. Easton makes his way up to the next one, and on the way there, we get some flashbacks and a quick philosophy check by John Kramer.
But you're not taking into consideration the most important human element of all.
Which is what?
The will to live.
And I kind of miss this guy, even though he was a crazy he did have a solid charisma. Much other than Detective Hoffman. I can't stand this guy and his lips, man. They're weird. Now, this is indeed a very unfortunate trap that leaves almost no chance to save both victims. However, the glass between the two victims and William is definitely breakable. The only question then remaining, how would you save those two? Wingardium Leviosa? I don't think so. It seems like the only way possible here is to break the glass, climb into the trap, and release both manually. This would only be possible by not activating the trap, which in any case is unlikely. However, this would be the ideal solution here. If you were to activate the trap though, and choose one of the victims to die, then the following happens. The victim close to death gets his hands released and after around 10 seconds gets pulled up. The time window of 10 seconds would allow you to break the glass, get into the trap and push up the hanging person. But you wouldn't be able to prevent him getting pulled up on his neck. Even if the victim pulls himself up on the metal wire with his freed hands, it is unlikely he would be able to stay like this for extended periods of time. If you've ever pulled yourself up on a rope, you know how tiring that is. And in this situation, I imagine the stamina is pretty low. William also doesn't seem to have any tools available to rescue that person. He would at least need a ladder or something similar for a successful rescue. Therefore, he would have done well inspecting the trap first before pulling the triggers and conclude not to activate it altogether. Still, no easy feat, but nonetheless possible since sound can travel through the glass window and therefore it would have been possible to realize what this trap is about without activating it. Moving on to the next one, Trap 4, I want to talk first and foremost about this. Yes, there is no doubt that direct sunlight is shining through. The metal grid in front of it looks very unstable, and with the tools available in this chamber, it is very likely that one can escape from here. But the big problem really here are the detonators attached on both wrists of William, meaning you must play the games until the very end, unless you find a way to get them off. But then again, fiddling with them may cause them to explode. I wouldn't recommend it. However, in this test, Mr. Easton was supposed to guide Debbie, his former lawyer, through the maze from above. He was supposed to assist her with rechanneling the steam by activating the switching devices. The catch here is that the hot steam is aimed at himself every time he activates a switch, which goes without saying is very painful. However, if you have watched my last videos, you will know that I'm a big fan of using clothes as tools. The first switch he could have easily pushed over with his shoes. The heel side to be precise, as it's the least elastic part of the shoe and therefore most useful for such task. Or if you're the boring type, reach over with your leg, push it over with, your feet, and there you go. Can be done like this too, but I'm not a fan of it. The second switch was, shakes my head in disbelief. This guy literally stretched himself over the railing like a crane to activate the switch and caused a huge upward stream of boiling hot air to blow right into his face. Definitely unpleasant, but really you don't need to bend over the railing here. There was by far enough space underneath to grab the switch here, which would have caused a stream of hot air to blow over your head instead. But anyway, Debbie eventually makes it through the maze and finds a circular saw at the end of the maze. The key to release a trap strapped onto her chest lies deep in Mr. Easton's body. She attempts to kill him but fails miserably. I found it a seriously dumb move, because the trap that was about to kill her was only strapped onto her with leather belts, meaning they could have easily been cut through with the circular saw. In this trap, 6 of William's subordinates are chained to a spinning carousel. The carousel stops randomly while the mounted shotgun is pointing at it. The shotgun is loaded with 6 rounds and would therefore kill each one of them. However, William would be able to save 2 of them by pushing down 2 buttons at the same time by using the machinery next by. The catch? Well, every time he pushes down the buttons, a metal bolt would pierce his hand. I mean, at this point I was convinced that the scriptwriter must have graduated in mechanical engineering. There are 2 main questions I would like to answer here. First, how William could have saved 2 people without the need of going through this nasty pain, and secondly, how there is potential to save more than just 2 people. In this picture, we see that the opening of the machinery can fit 2 hands, allowing you to push down 2 buttons at the same time without the need of piercing your own hand. Easy. The tricky part here is to save everyone. First and foremost, the time is the main problem here. There are about 40 seconds between each triggered shot. With the method of before, William can save 2 people, giving a window of roughly 120 seconds before the first person gets killed. If my math is correct, then that would mean 120 seconds to save everyone, 160 seconds to save 5, 200 for 4 survivors, and 240 seconds for 3. While 120 seconds is probably too confident here, I think 240 could be enough to save at least 3 of the victims. How would I do it? Let me explain. Around the carousel are ceiling-high metal bars which deny access. However, attached to the bars behind the shotgun, there is a 4 square meter or 43 square feet metal grid protecting the shotgun of possible manipulation. Meaning, Jigsaw knew that the distance between each bar is wide enough to allow someone to reach through, giving the potential to fiddle around with the mounted gun. Could that mean he was scared that the device would not withhold strong interference? Pulls and pushes? Possibly. That means if you can quickly tie a lasso or loop with your clothes, necktie, belt, and the cables lying around in this room, you would have had a chance to swing it around the shotgun and pull it out of alignment. Because, have a look here, we can clearly see that there is no further metal grid denying access the same way like behind the gun. So this is the opening where you should try to swing your lasso through and around the gun and basically save them all. In the final trap, William realizes that it's not him who ultimately decides if he shall remain alive, but Tara and Brandt, the family members of Harold Abbott, a guy William quite literally killed by denying him insurance cover. In the other cage is Pamela, William's sister. I guess her only purpose there is to enjoy the show.
Not.
The switching device mounted on the wall in Tara and Brad's cave turns out to be the device that decides if William shall remain alive or not. If the switch is pulled to the death side, a mechanism will activate that injects hydrofluoric acid directly into his body. Everyone who has watched Breaking Bad or didn't fall asleep in chemistry class like I did should know that you want to generally avoid any contact with that acid. Yep, exactly. Hydrofluoric acid burns literally through anything, except plastic.
I'm sorry, what were you asking me? Oh, yes. That stupid plastic container I asked you to buy.
Special thanks to Mr. White here. While Tara is not able to pull the switch, Brent, well, he doesn't seem to have an issue with it. William's evasion rate seems to be underpowered too. Definitely should have invested more skill points into that attribute. That needle trap could have been dodged with a nice duck and subsequent jiu-jitsu roll, and the acid could have been used to burn through the cages. Just soak your clothes in it and throw it onto the grid. This has to be done quickly though, for obvious reasons. By the way, the smoke or haze that arises from William's burning is highly toxic. All of our remaining characters could be soon dead too, just saying. But anyway, let's move on to the bonus. The Maestro himself. Jesus, that was so fun to watch because this is literally how you beat the traps like a god does, alright? At last, Detective Hoffman himself gets trapped into one of his own traps. The probably most famous of all Saw traps, the Jaw Splitter. But he doesn't around very long. He breaks his hand, escapes both arm straps, and attempts to release the Jaw Splitter from his head without success though. However, he succeeds in evading the trap in the most creative way possible. Show them, Hoffman. I could have not done it better. What a great example on how to beat the traps in Saw 6. If you have made it this far, you're awesome. Leave a like and subscribe, and I see you guys next time.